Talk boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this per tweet from International Boxing News. McCaskill versus Habazin next. The WBC have ordered purse bids on January 30th for a fight between Jessica McCaskill and her mandatory challenger, Ivana Habazin. McCaskill no longer has the IBF title. WBC, WBO, and WBA titles will be on the line.
If Ivana Habazin was, in fact, Jessica's mandatory by way of the IBF as well, one would think that the vacant title, it would be on the line as well. So it still would be an undisputed title fight.
One would think. We first caught wind of this news some weeks ago. Ivana Habazin periodically claiming that she was Jessica McCaskill's mandatory challenger by way of more than one sanctioning body.
Weeks later, still no deal.
There still doesn't appear to be a deal done. We don't even know if they entered into negotiations, and even if they did, how far along are they, and will they be able to reach a deal before this January 30th deadline? Because January 30th, that's right around the corner.
That's this upcoming Tuesday.
Tuesday comes and goes, and these two teams don't reach a deal. One is left to wonder, what exactly is Jessica McCaskill's promotional situation? Is she still with Matchroom? Because one would think if she is, this would have been a relatively easy, inexpensive fight to make.
Ivana Habazin's not a high-profile opponent. This is not a high-profile fight.
It's not a knock on Ivana Habazin's ability so much as a gauge for her marquee value. She really isn't all that well known. She's plenty experienced and she's been around for years. She is a former champion, but in terms of marquee value, she's not a particularly expensive opponent.
It's a little bit surprising that after all these weeks, this fight hasn't been made.
As far as the fight itself, I think it's a very winnable fight for Jessica McCaskill, who's coming right off that lopsided loss to Chantel Cameron. That was a one-sided fight, it was. But this fight with Ivana Habazin, well, Ivana's no Chantel Cameron.
She's not.
I think Jessica can beat her. I think that this is an ideal opportunity for Jessica to kill two birds with one stone. Rebound off the loss with Chantel, rebound and get back in the winner's bracket, and simultaneously satisfy your mandatory challenger so you can hang on to what belts you still have at 147 pounds.
Kill two birds with one stone.
Don't let that Chantel Cameron fight fool you.
Don't.
You know, Chantel Cameron may have been able to handle and effectively work around the aggressive pressure fighting from Jessica McCaskill, but not everybody's as coordinated and well-schooled as Chantel Cameron.
Ivana Habazin isn't.
The last we heard from Rick Ramos, who handles the career of Jessica McCaskill, was that he's flying a European fighter to join Jessica McCaskill's camp. So that does mean they are in camp, they are in training, they are preparing, essentially, for Jessica's next fight.
Even if a deal isn't done yet.
Or a deal hasn't been announced and her next fight hasn't been announced yet, I should say. With that Tuesday deadline right around the corner, the clock is ticking.
She's got to fight Ivana Habazin if she wants to hang on to those alphabet titles.
And I think she can beat her. I think Jessica McCaskill can win. The question is, what does she do beyond the Ivana Habazin fight? Does she have a rematch with Chantel Cameron?
Does she move up in weight and take on Terry Harper? Or will Terry Harper move down, challenge Jessica for what belt she has at 147 pounds, provided she beats Ivana?
And I think she will, provided they make this fight. There's also the subject of Natasha Jonas to be addressed. She, like Terry Harper, is a reigning champion in the junior middleweight division, one of two. It's just Terry and Natasha holding the titles up there. I wonder if she's not an option for Jessica, beyond a potential Ivana Habazin fight.
Jessica fights Ivana Habazin, beats Ivana Habazin, hangs on to those alphabet titles at 147 pounds. She can then defend them.
Terry Harper feels like moving down from 154 to 147, or Natasha Jonas.
She moves down, maybe she fights Jessica.
Later on this year, for now, the first order of business seems to be nailing down this Ivana Habazin fight, because if they don't, those titles are forfeit.
Yeah, Jessica's coming off a loss, but you have to remember that that fight took place at 140 pounds, not 147. At 147, Jessica's still a champion, and she's still the woman to beat.
We'll see if they don't get this fight with Ivana over the line and make an official announcement. And super lightweight news, Teofimo Lopez Sr. says his son looked sharp in the Sandor Martin fight.
No, he didn't.
Sandor Martin, who was a late replacement. You know, ahead of that fight, I identified Sandor Martin as a potential banana skin, a guy who stylistically could give Teofimo Lopez a lot of problems, and for what it's worth, he did.
One recorded knockdown, two unofficially.
Teofimo Lopez exhibited an inability to cut off the ring and pin down his opponent to get off his hard shots.
Land meaty punches.
Opposite the ring, a moving target who can stay on the move for the entirety of a fight, a southpaw.
Teofimo didn't look sharp. Teofimo didn't look good. He might have won a decision. He might have done enough.
There's winning a decision, there's winning the fight, and then there's looking good doing it. And in some instances, those two things are mutually exclusive. Teofimo Lopez did not look good opposite the ring. Sandor Martin, his father says, I saw the fight because I hadn't seen the fight. So when I went back and I seen the fight with Sandor Martin, said Lopez to BoxingScene.com, he looked good. He looked sharp. He didn't get tired.
So because he didn't get tired, you think he looked good?
Teofimo Lopez is at his best opposite the ring, a more aggressive fighter, an aggressive puncher that he can counter.
But opposite the ring, a moving target that's going to fight from the outside. His limitations were exposed.
He's a pretty good counterpuncher if the man opposite the ring can give him something to counter. But if he doesn't, if the man opposite the ring fights on the balls of his feet, on the outside, and stays on the defensive,
sets Teofimo up to walk him into punches, walk him into counter punches.
I mean, you saw what he looked like. Teofimo Lopez Sr. continued, I don't understand something. My son just beat the guy who retired Mikey Garcia, and everybody's like, yo, Teo didn't look good, or Teo was supposed to knock this dude out. You can't knock out a dude that doesn't go to the fight trying to fight. There wasn't no opportunity there for us to drop this dude.
Well, that's the thing. You're supposed to be able to create those opportunities if he doesn't afford you any.
Easier said than done, I know, but if there's a feeling that Teofimo Lopez didn't look good in that fight, well, that's why.
And he's not going to get better based on his father coddling him and talking up his lackluster showings, his lackluster performances.
First step in fixing a problem is admitting that there is one.
This is something that both Lopezes seem to struggle with.
You know, even after Teofimo's big win over Vasyl Lomachenko over a year ago, I said on several occasions I didn't like his chances against the upper echelon super lightweights, the 140-pounders, that the advantages that he had as a lightweight, he won't have as a super lightweight.
Here we are.
His father continued, discussed the possibility of a Prograis fight and how that's not possible. Lopez Sr. on Lopez versus Prograis says there ain't no money in that fight.
Oh, there ain't no money in that fight. Well, how much money did you make fighting Campos? And how much money did you make fighting Sandor Martin?
Lopez Sr.'s comments in reference to a Prograis fight read a lot like an incomplete sentence. You say there's no money in a Prograis fight,
when what you really mean is that there's not enough money to take that risk.
Regis is not going to happen, bro, said Lopez Sr. to BoxingScene.com. What, we're going to get 35%? There ain't no money in that fight. Prior to Lopez Sr. making this declaration, Jose Ramirez, fulminated over receiving 35% of the monetary split. Team Lopez, similarly, isn't interested in entering the ring against the dangerous knockout puncher for that exact number either. And the thing is that the WBC set that purse split, you understand, because Ramirez versus Prograis was a mandated fight. That was a fight that was ordered. A fight between Prograis and Lopez.
That would be a voluntary title defense, not a mandatory title defense. You can negotiate the splits amongst yourselves, if you're willing.
If you want to, but you don't. You're using the collapse of the Ramirez fight as an excuse not to even go into negotiations, because you guys, you don't really want that fight.
You never did.
Although Team Lopez has perpetually shown an interest in taking Prograis up on his audacious offer, until the dollar signs begin to make sense, Lopez Sr. simply won't allow his son to move forward with their mouth-watering bout. Why are we going to fight Regis Prograis when we aren't going to get the money that we're supposed to get?
What money are you supposed to get?
Just because the WBC set the purse split for Prograis versus Ramirez at 65-35, that has absolutely nothing to do with you.
That was a mandated fight. This isn't. That was a mandated title defense. This is a voluntary title defense.
You guys can reach a deal amicably amongst yourselves if you're willing. If you're able.
Mr. Big in the Britches carrying on about what they're supposed to get. Why don't you make Regis an offer then, based on what you think you're supposed to get?
If you really were good for the kind of money you're looking for, you'd be able to finance an offer to Regis, the champion, you being the challenger. You'd be able to bankroll that fight yourself if you really were good for what you think you're good for, but you're not.
You're using the purse split from a different set of negotiations with a different fighter as an excuse for you to not even bother.
Because you never really wanted to fight this guy, even though you're the ones that got the ball rolling. It was your son that antagonized him immediately after the Prograis versus Zepeda fight, talking about how slow he is. Well, I guess he's not slow enough for you to go into negotiations with him.
No.
I guess he's not slow enough for you to fight him.
No.
I never expected Teofimo Lopez to fight him.
I didn't.
There's a few reasons. For starters, Bob Arum said a long time ago he don't want to do no business with Probellum or any pro-bellum fighters, and that's what Regis Prograis is.
Due to Pro Bellum's tenuous association with Daniel Kinahan.
2, Bob Arum and Top Rank, they ain't got Regis Prograis under contract. I hardly think they're gonna give this guy vast sums of money to come over and beat up their boys with no commitment from him.
Because he beats the fuck out of both of those guys. He beats Lopez, he beats Ramirez.
Top Rank wasn't about to let Regis Prograis just barge in and crash what is their party. I think it's Top Rank's plan to eventually stage a match between Teofimo Lopez and Jose Ramirez, provided Jose makes it past Richard Comey.
They got their own party planned, and Regis Prograis ain't invited.
And the fighters themselves and their teams, their managers, they don't want that Prograis fight.
They carry on about percentages and purse splits like the boxing community at large ain't got no common sense. We all see what you're doing.
At least I do. Both Teofimo and Jose view each other as more desirable options than a Regis Prograis fight because Teofimo thinks he can beat Jose and Jose thinks he can beat Teofimo. But neither of the two are confident that they can beat Regis.
That's it.
It's what they figure. They figure they can make the same or more money by fighting each other than what they'd be making fighting Regis, but they like their chances against each other more than they like their chances against Regis. They're both avoiding him jointly.
They both are, and that's what this is.
And I don't know what Regis is going to do. I don't know where he's going to go.
He's coming up short of answers trying to get in the ring with top-ranked fighters. Maybe he goes to the PBC?
Maybe, though, given their reputation for over-marinating fights. How long would it take to make a fight between Regis and one of their champions at 140 pounds?
They don't tend to do things over there in a timely fashion. They really don't.
Can they give Regis Prograis the kind of money that he's looking for, it being that he is at least a more well-known fighter than those fighters are?
140 has become a political division, and it sucks.
And finally, boxing scribe Nick Pete reacted to the news that Anthony Joshua would be facing America's own Jermaine Franklin in his very next fight by saying, "It feels like a cash grab from Team Joshua."
A cash grab? Jermaine Franklin?
It feels like a cash grab from Team Joshua to milk as much money out of him as possible. Joshua learns nothing on April Fool's Day by knocking out Jermaine Franklin before he fights Dillian White. He needs to knock over Jermaine Franklin to get his mind right? Is this a joke?
I told you there were going to be people like this.
Stuff like this is a big part of the reason I wanted Anthony to take on Otto Wallin instead of some others, Jermaine Franklin included. That's a fight that's harder to criticize because that same Otto Wallin, he gave Tyson Fury all he can handle, and he has since rebounded off the loss he suffered in that fight. He's a fighter who's never been stopped.
So imagine if Anthony were to stop him. How are you going to criticize that?
What are you going to say? Tyson Fury himself couldn't knock this guy out, but imagine if Anthony did. What are you going to say?
There's no way you can trash Anthony Joshua for fighting Otto Wallin without indirectly trashing Tyson Fury because he fought him first.
And he didn't stop him. So if Anthony were to stop him, hypothetically, what's the criticism going to be? What are you going to say?
Because you can't say much.
This is why I wasn't crazy about Anthony Joshua going with Jermaine Franklin instead of Otto Wallin. In truth, I understand Anthony Joshua's situation. He's coming off of 2 consecutive losses and he's breaking in a new trainer, so he needs to take his foot off the gas. He needs a bit of a lighter touch.
That's customary in the sport. That's why Deontay Wilder, after he was coming off of 2 consecutive losses, that's why he fought his old sparring partner.
Robert Helenius, a guy who was stopped by Johan Duhaupas, a guy who was stopped by Gerald Washington, and those 2 guys, they were stopped by Deontay Wilder.
Do you see what I mean?
Deontay Wilder gets to rebound off 2 consecutive losses to Tyson Fury with what was literally his old sparring partner that had already been stopped in previous fights by Deontay's previous opponents. And there's no uproar.
No backlash.
Tyson Fury and his box office sparring session opposite the ring, Derek Chisora, who he had already beat 2 times before.
Why the fuck was he fighting him again?
You couldn't find somebody else for that guy to fight. Am I understanding this right? The excuse is going to be that the reason he fought Derek Chisora is because he couldn't get Usyk in the ring and he couldn't get AJ in the ring.
That's what the Fury fans are going to tell you.
They're going to highlight the failed set of negotiations between Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua without highlighting that Tyson Fury was the one setting all the time constraints and all the deadlines needlessly, just for those negotiations to fall apart so he can go into a new set of negotiations with the same management team.
258 management.
They don't ask themselves, why did you consistently set time constraints when you were dealing with Anthony Joshua, but you didn't do any of that when you were dealing with Derek Chisora?
Joshua fight was worth considerably more money than the Derek Chisora fight, and yet it's almost like Tyson Fury was deliberately making himself hard to deal with. when he was dealing with Joshua.
He set those time constraints. Those weren't necessary. The whole goddamn thing was a bluff anyway. The only reason Tyson Fury issued out that public call-out was to make Anthony Joshua look bad, not because he was expecting them to say yes.
The whole thing was a bluff.
Even now, people don't realize that. What are you telling yourself? That after 2 consecutive losses to Alexander Usyk, Tyson Fury was expecting Anthony Joshua to say yes? To agree to fight?
No way. He was expecting him to say no, so that when he says no and he doesn't agree to fight, he can publicly shame him for it. That's what he was expecting, but that's not what happened.
And that's the part of it that goes over everybody's heads. They say that Tyson Fury only fought Derek Chisora because he couldn't fight Anthony Joshua.
Oh, because Tyson Fury was really supposed to fight Anthony at a time when Anthony's coming off of 2 back-to-back losses to do a fight when? When? In December.
While Tyson Fury needlessly throws out deadlines and time constraints.
Well, even if you go with it, even if you believe that, you're telling me that you couldn't find someone better for Tyson Fury to fight than a guy that he beat 2 times already, so you can turn around and be super critical of Joshua versus Franklin?
Anthony Joshua and Jermaine Franklin are on even terrain because they're both coming off of losses. They both dropped decisions in their last fights. But you tell me if Tyson Fury and Derek Chisora were on even terrain.
An undefeated 2-time heavyweight champion at the peak of his popularity and the height of his powers versus a gatekeeper with losses in the double digits.
And don't forget that he beat this guy 2 times already years ago.
The way I see it, if Deontay Wilder can rebound off of 2 consecutive losses with an old sparring partner and Tyson Fury can have a glorified sparring session with Derek Chisora,
And there's nothing wrong with Joshua versus Franklin.
Jermaine Franklin's younger than those guys, less wear and tear, and Jermaine Franklin's never been stopped. Robert Helenius has, more than once, and Derek Chisora.
If you're okay with Wilder versus Helenius or Fury versus Chisora, if you're okay with those fights, in theory, you should be okay with this one, unless you're a fucking hypocrite or a fanboy.
A Fury fanboy, more specifically.
Because when you see critiques like this, you know what's really behind them.
Who these people really are. Joshua versus Franklin wouldn't have been my first choice, but it's not the worst choice.